public forum in that they relate to items actually already on the agenda. And so the first of those today will be Joanna Gould, who's speaking regarding the Community Facilities Network Plan. So Joanna, you're aware that this is, you've got 10 minutes,
Yep,
and that it's about the plan itself rather than any individual facility that you might like a decision on at some point.
Yep. Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Community Facilities Network Plan report. I don't agree that there are no gaps in this plan. I agree with other submitters that this plan does not seem thorough enough. I don't agree that the process outlined in question 2 of the consultation is sufficient to address the residents' needs. Yes, community facilities should be community-led, but not all facilities should involve having a community partner. Community facilities are a service provided by council to serve the residents in their communities. They are not for community partnerships with groups, churches or trusts. They are for the residents. Yes, community needs must be demonstrated. A feasibility study needs to be done by local council staff, not consultants. Local council staff have intellectual property, history of the area, knowledge of the community and residents' needs. The feasibility study should be open and transparent, e.g. workshops should include interested residents as well as elected members. I do agree that a business case should be done by local council staff and council's role needs to be well established. I don't agree that community boards should solely make decisions on community facilities. Board members are lay people and elections are held every 3 years. How are new board members able to make informed decisions on establishing or disestablishing a community facility? I have a number of concerns. Firstly, this plan doesn't take into account the increase in social housing and infill housing in certain suburbs. Secondly, I am concerned that the changes to the district plan have not been considered thoroughly enough, especially changes to residential living density zones. Thirdly, it concerns me that developer contributions collected in my area are not being reinvested into community facilities in my area. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Joanna. So there's time for questions. Melanie.
Regarding the comment about community boards,
Yeah.
who do you think should have the decision making there?
I think it needs to be a combined effort for everybody involved, that it shouldn't just be solely the task of community boards, because council staff have a lot of intellectual property. They know the areas, they are specialists in their, they've trained in those areas. So community board members, as I said, are just lay people. They're not trained specifically to design community centres or understand urban development or the social issues, different communities.
So when you say everyone, who do you mean exactly?
Council, community boards, stakeholders and residents. It needs to be a combined effort.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So Joanna, at the moment we have a process whereby if a facility was going to be established or disestablished or those kind of things, there would be a proposal put together by those sort of expert staff.
Yeah.
That then would probably go out for stakeholder and community consultation, and that feedback would come in, and then the community board would make a decision. Does that help?
Yeah, I
with
don't
that?
think enough emphasis is actually given to the residents. I think more consultation is done with stakeholders rather than residents, and as I said before, the community facilities are actually a service for residents, and so I think the focus needs to be kind of redirected to what the community, what the residents actually need, rather than who the stakeholder is, who the community partnerships are, because they're just doing a role, whereas they're a service for residents.
Yeah. So one of the things we have heard is that there's some concern about that, the emphasis on partnerships, yeah, and trying to get as many partners as possible, and that some communities won't have the capacity for that. So we do have some wording to soften that for today.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and so that it talks about helping develop capacity in communities, and that, you know, we'd like to increase it, but it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is that sound all right?
I'm interested in seeing opportunities to empower residents. Like it seems to be that the stakeholders get to say what activities and events and things happen in community facilities, whereas with all the issues and social isolation, I think it's more important that we start empowering some of the residents from the bottom up to provide them with opportunities to say what do they want to do in their community facilities, rather than having people tell them what they're going to provide for them in their community facilities.
Thank you. Anne?
Kia ora, thank you, Joanna. And just further to that,
Yeah.
how do you think that could happen? What would be the best way to get that voice coming through? Would it be a community meeting at a library, or?
Yeah, the workshops are a good idea, because then not everybody's interested in discussing community facilities and community development. It's boring to some people. But those that are actually interested in supporting residents and giving them a voice and empowering them to find different ways to use different facilities in creative ways and get the uses up on the community facilities. Yeah, I think just having more open and honest conversations and not waiting till consultation stages, that there's more opportunities at community board level to discuss these issues.
Can you see an opportunity for things like neighbourhood support to perhaps be a vehicle through which people can get together in chat?
Yeah.
Yep. And I was thinking about something else too. Residents associations. Have you got one that you're active in?
No, I'm not active in my one, no.
No, but there are quite a few, aren't there? And they're also a
Yeah.
good vehicle through which we can have these discussions.
Yeah.
Right.
My concern is that residents associations get taken over and it becomes a combined voice of the residents, rather than every resident gets to say their individual take on the situation and what they would actually like. So, yeah.
So I think one of the things to notice is that this is trying to be an enabling document. So there are plenty of community facilities, one in my local area, for example, where they asked the community what type of activities would you like, and then they tried to find the right sort of ones for the community.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that sounds great.
yeah, and I know the same's happening with Linwood Pool at the moment as well. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for
Okay,
your time.
thank you so much for your time. Okay, next we have Graham Spinks, who's also talking to us on the Community Facilities Network Plan on behalf of Christchurch Martial Arts Community. Welcome, Graham.
Thank you for inviting me. I just wanted to say that I don't think there are suitable numbers of facilities in Christchurch to meet the needs of the community, especially East Side. It was one of the nights that prompted me to call and inquire if I could talk today. Particularly martial arts groups, we tend to hide away in our white pyjamas and small buildings and grapple each other or kick and punch each other to our heart's content. But it's been a lot more difficult for a lot of people to engage in this sort of recreational activity that provides discipline in the community. Since the earthquakes hit, there was a plethora of school halls and especially school halls and scout halls and what have you that have all been taken over by other businesses and Oscar businesses, etc., that are not available now for community groups to go into. Places at a cheap rate to provide discipline for our community that need it most. And if you want to see what they're doing right now, you just need to go outside Linwood McDonald's at 11 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night and have a look at what they're up to. And I challenge people to do that, because that's quite a tough thing to do, to stand out on the street there. And I know that countries that deal with these sort of problems, what they do is they have these sort of problems and they solve them by engaging after school activities for children at a cheap rate. And it's just not happening. And you wonder why there's no discipline, you wonder why people are assaulted, you wonder why kids drift into gangs, and you have these social housing issues and drugs and associated problems, and they can be solved by careful planning. And I think that that's what needs to happen, particularly East Side. West Side's been catered for by some rich Russian, thank God for him. He's engaging all the children in Rolleston and those areas with Olympic sports, and I think that's a grand gesture on his behalf, but we need better planning on East Side, that's for sure. And my own circumstances, I've run a dojo for years in judo, and particularly I've fostered other martial arts because I believe it's a great way to instill disciplines in communities, but we were disestablished with the earthquakes. We were on a park, we had cheap rates for kids. Now we had to go to a commercial model, and it doesn't really suit most people that really need the training. And I say these people really need the training. When I say that, I really mean it. I'm talking about kids with problems, anger management problems, etc., that tend to drift in towards martial arts clubs when they can afford it, or when the parents can afford to get them there, you know? And I just don't think we're in the right spot in a commercial venue. And I noticed that there's so many around our area in Durham Street, there's so many similar clubs in similar situations have to drift to commercial models. I mean, cripes, in other countries in Europe, they foster martial arts clubs. And the reason they foster them is because they want children with self-control in their community, with good discipline and good self-defence. And that actually drives down the number of assaults at the angry age. If you train your children well and you discipline them well, you don't have problems when they're teens and hit the alcohol-crazed stage of life that people tend to roll through. And that's been proven. So our particular club, and group of clubs, we have a group of them, and I find it difficult that a third of our members are consistently in arrears, and yet we're trying to get a change of use from the City Council now, and we've got to engage architects and engineers on our side for a change of use that is for the City Council to get the permits to get a change of use, and they're arguing fine points of the change of use at $200 an hour each. I find it insulting, obscene that while they're arguing at a combined total of $400 an hour, that some family can't afford to come in and pay $50 a month for their kid to do kickboxing, and yet we're paying these same fees. You know, we're community based, and lots of community based groups are disenfranchised since the earthquakes, and COVID hasn't helped, of course. And I just think, you know, that if we look after the more vulnerable people, a lot of things fall into place in society. You know, you've got to call me a socialist, but you know, I believe in that. End of speech, I think.
Okay, are you open to some questions?
Yes.
So just before we get into other questions, my first question is, what is it that you would like changed in the plan? So I know you've got some issues around other stuff at the moment.
Don't think you've got your ticks and boxes covered by saying that you've got enough facilities. You know, you haven't. It's clearly shown, because if you look at the cheap seats in Durham Street, you start looking down there and all these different clubs and organisations are moving into those cheap warehouses and having to take up commercial models because of a lack of facilities and community at community level. Well, you know, you look after soccer and rugby, they've got fields to play on. The likes of martial arts, we need these cheap halls to foster community spirit, and then they're not there. You know, it's swimming in Auckland at the Commonwealth Games got a new venue where boxing and judo, we were put in some hall, and then after the hall we were disenfranchised as sports, while athletics got a new track and field stadium, while swimming got their stadium, while hockey got a stadium. You know, where's the hat that we can hang our coat on for martial arts groups?
Okay, so I think we've got a couple of other questions as well. So Melanie, and then Yanni, and then James.
Within this plan, it talks about work being underway to look at the condition of different buildings. Our community board that I'm on talked about looking at not just the number of facilities that are around, but how much spare time that they have available to take on groups that could use them, like space that people could use, and also the cost of them. Do you think that's something that should be included in this plan that would then give the information that you're...
I looked at that, the new stadium that you're going to build right in the centre of town, and looked at the pricing for the units, and I went, well, it's unbelievable. What are you going to get people? You're only going to get professional people from the west side of town engaged with that community. You're not engaging the east side. I mean, half the people on each side, they can't afford, like, they get a full job, and then a month later they're only working 20 hours or 10 hours a week. I mean, how can they budget their own lives around that sort of lifestyle, let alone afford, you know, the getting the kids into clubs and doing things? It's just not feasible from their point of view.
Okay,
You know,
thanks.
it's just, I feel that poverty is driving a lot of the problems in that community, and you know, unless we have affordable activities for the children to engage, there's going to be some angry kids out there.
Yeah. So we've got Yanni, then James.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the deputation. I just wondered if you think there's a need for council to have, because the staff advice has been that this isn't for sports groups, this is community facilities plan. So just in terms of moving forward, having a sports network plan where the sporting facilities and recreation facilities are clearly shown and gaps identified as you've said, and a process to look at what's needed, is that something that you think would be needed?
What works? I can speak to what works within martial arts. Or what I can say what doesn't work. When we had the old community centres and we tried to mix it up with other sports, they come in there and they stomp all over our mats. They disrespect them. That doesn't work. Only what works for us is we have to have dedicated mat space committed to a particular group. So together sharing a facility is fine, but they need separate rooms for separate groups, and that works better in that way, because it doesn't work any other way, because we don't get the, you know, like our martial arts particularly, we have a lot of foreigners involved, you know, like immigrants, I should say, immigrants to our country get involved, and a lot of poorer, well, the Pacifica community and the local people. It's that they're the most of our members, I suppose.
Yeah. So
You know, when we
I'm
look
going
at
to
it.
try and get one last question in. Pauline?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. A really good submission. How many martial arts groups are there in Christchurch? Do you know? And is there a collective?
Well, before the earthquakes, I counted them as 120, and after the earthquakes, I haven't actually counted them, but I reckon we're down to about half. And those that are surviving had to adopt a commercial model. The thing is, we've lost the whole tier of a considerable number of the cheaper clubs have gone, and that's been part of the problem, is that they've got nowhere to go right now, and they've got to. For instance, our club, we're trying to survive on that edge, trying to make fees affordable, but we're getting bitten at the other end with costs because we're in this commercial situation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a really good message to hear, and I
So it's only
also
about half.
fully support the benefits of it as
But
well.
I
that
believe
you're
that I
extolling.
believe the numbers are significant. I believe that we'd rival hockey if our combined total of martial arts would rival the likes of hockey. I wouldn't say soccer, but we're huge. We are
Okay,
huge.
so we will have to wind up there.
Yep.
What I will do, if you just, there's just there's two things. Firstly, I don't know who your local councillor is, but the other issues that you've got at the moment around consenting and things, maybe a conversation with the local councillor might be helpful, just to look at the process there. And the other thing is, if you're looking at affordability at the moment, we'll get you in touch with our funding staff, because it may be that there's ways to get some funding for lower income families to help get those kids involved as well, through the local community board maybe. Yeah, so we might try and get some information to you in that space as well. We'll run out of time now, but we could. That's not for the topic for today. So we'll get some information to you on some funding avenues as well.
And can we hear back from staff on the sports network plan and where that's got to?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
I mean, we'll do it when we consider
Yeah.
this, but I'll...
Okay. Thanks so much, Graham.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next we have Mark Gerard, who's going to speak on behalf of Historic Places Canterbury regarding the heritage incentive grants and the intangible grants. Welcome, Mark.
Councillors, thank you very much. I was expecting, it's a verbal submission, there's nothing written, so you can relax. I wasn't expecting a deputation, so thank you.
That's on the agenda.
So this is, thank you for the opportunity to make the submission of deputation, which has made reference to the following items on the council agenda before you. That's item number 11, the Heritage Incentive Grant Funding, updates to eligibility and guidelines, and number 12, Intangible Heritage Grant Fundings Guidelines for a new grant scheme. The submission will be verbal and brief, as Historic Places Canterbury wishes to inform the councillors that it endorses the staff report's recommendations on both agenda items. That's the theme. Turning to specific items, on agenda item 11, as regards Heritage Incentive Grant funding, Historic Places request the councillors approve the staff recommendations as outlined in the report. The proposed changes align the Heritage Incentive Grant funding with the Council's Our Heritage, Our Taonga Heritage Strategy 2019-2029. Historic Places Canterbury, as you are aware, applauded the Council for the formulation and adopting of this heritage strategy. HPC considers the expansion of the grant criteria as in keeping with the intent of the heritage strategy. COVID-19 has had an effect on the Christchurch economy, whilst thankfully not as marked as the rest of the world, resulting in heritage buildings projects that have been postponed. HPC endorses the staff recommendations that the unassigned funds be carried over, as we expect there will be a lift in activity as heritage building projects are reactivated. We should point out, as the obvious, that such funding provides an incentive for owners to invest, which should be and will be welcomed by councillors as it aids the city's recovery. Carryover funding allows proposed projects to be reactivated. Moving to agenda item 12. Intangible Heritage Grant Funding Guidelines for a New Grant Scheme. HPC recommends the councils approve the report's recommendations. HPC considers this aligns with the council's heritage strategy in developing and diversifying its role in and in support of the city's heritage. In this regard, HPC requests the councils approve the purpose of the Intangible Heritage Grant Fund, and we also endorse the recommendation that the funding for the Intangible Heritage Grant funding be carried over. And finally, on another note, councillors, Historic Places Canterbury wishes to thank you for your efforts, and we include the council staff in what has been a fragmented year. That's an understatement. We hope you managed to enjoy some smartphone-free quality Christmas, New Year holiday time with your partners and families, and as a recovering, almost completely recovered political spouse, the importance of the cell phone-free area for families where you can't sneak and look at your emails when they're not looking is important. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the very timely advice on that. My family thanks you. Any questions for Mark? No? Thank you very much for coming in. Okay, so presentation of petitions. There are none today.